Here we're going to tie a CDC golden stone. First thing we're going to do is add a gold bead and a bit of 015 or 010 lead wire. Then all we're going to do is just take our thread and wrap through the wire a couple of times, make sure it's secure and it's not going to move around on us. Then the next thing I'm going to do is just build up a ramp from the wire to the shank of the hook here. I want a nice transition. There we go. And once I've done that, I'm just going to take my thread all the way back to the tail, or to the back end of it. And we're going to take a clump of pheasant tail. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab probably about 6, 7, no more than 8 or 9 fibers. I want to make it so that the tips are as even as possible here. I want the tail to be fairly short, about half of the length of the shank of the hook. So I just kind of roughly measure it out. I'm going to tie these in right on top of the shank. Take my thread all the way to the back there. I like a nice short tail on my golden stones. Now the next thing to do is to tie in our rib. For the rib you can use a few different materials. You can either use wire or a monofilament if you don't want too much segmentation. I like to use wire. I like a little bit of segmentation. Also adds some weight to the fly. So what I'm going to do is just cut a chunk here. It's a few inches long. I'm going to take that wire and I'm just going to tie it in along the side of the hook. Now the next thing to do is tie in our casing. For this, I'm going to use a stretch of wide pearl tinsel. I just dropped on the floor. There we go. We're going to tie this right on top of the shank of the hook. Then I'll take my thread forward, just cover it all up, make sure everything's nice and smooth. Now ready to dub the body. For that I'm going to use some SLF Whitlock Golden Stone Nymph dubbing. You can use a lot of different kinds of dubbing, anything that has that golden stone color. I like the SLF just because it has a little bit of flash to it and lots of bugginess as well, kind of all mixed together. I want to start fairly thin at the back here. I don't want to put on too much at once. Then I'm just going to kind of taper it forward as I work my way forward. And I'm going to take my body here about 2/3 of the way to the bead. I'm not going to go all the way forward quite yet. There we go. I'm going to stop right about there. I'm going to take that piece of flash, pull it right over the top, secure it with my thread, a couple of wraps, and I can trim it out. Now I'm going to take my wire here. I'm just going to wrap and segment the body with this wire. See there, I've got nice segmentation with a little bit of flash. I'm going to make sure this is nice and secure. Now the next thing to do is to build up a little thorax kind of ball. So it'll act as a prop for our CDC and our soft hackle. It doesn't need to be a giant piece of dubbing, it just needs to be larger than our body. Add just a hint more here. There we go, and then we'll take our thread to just in front of it. Now we're ready to wrap our CDC. For that I'm just going to use a dun or a tan or a golden colored CDC feather. All we're going to do is just take this feather. I like to lick my fingers and kind of stroke the fibers back, just kind of initially coax them back. And we're going to wrap the CDC. And then I can capture it with my thread here. Trim out the stem. Now we're ready for our soft hackle. I'm going to take some tan soft hackle, tan grizzly I should say. I like the grizzly, adds a little bit of variation. You have to be kind of careful with these feathers. They're very delicate, so if I break this one, don't be surprised. I'm going to be very careful here. Just kind of gently stroke the fibers back. With each wrap, I just kind of try to force those feathers to lay back. And I can capture the stem once I'm finished. Trim out the stem. I'll lay down a couple more wraps just to make sure things are secure, and it'll also help the material lay back. And lastly, what we're going to do is just take a little bit of that dubbing again. Be careful not to add too much at this point. You don't want a giant clump ending up at the head of your fly. So I just add kind of enough to coat the thread, about an inch or two. I'm just going to lay down a couple of wraps here right behind the bead. This will help hide the work we just did, and also kind of add a little bit of a head to the fly. Once you've done that, you can whip finish. And you have a CDC golden stone. Great little fly in the spring. Nice and heavy. Good attractor fly. CDC kind of holds air bubbles, adds movement to the fly. And you can get all the materials for this fly at intheriffle.com.